If man is a hologram, it's time to get buzzed.
Central Intelligence Agency.
It was described by witnesses as...
Stiv Richards is joining us today. He's the founder of what's called holographic kinetic therapy technique, and it's based and steeped in Aboriginal Australian culture and modalities. So he'll be describing to us what that means and how it applies to perhaps some of the spiritual cleansing that needs to occur going forward. Stiv, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Just want to start out by asking, what is this term holographic kinetics? What does that mean?
Man is actually a hologram of time. And if you have a look at a hologram, it consists of millions of little fractals. But every fractal is a hologram of the same as Now what happens with man, his thoughts become thought forms, become life forms. They become part of a fractal. Once they're locked in, what does a fractal do? A fractal reproduces itself for its own survival for the whole hologram. When you can unfold time and space on that fractal and you can change it, it then changes the hologram. Man himself is a hologram of time. And as a hologram of time, every memory in man that's ever taken place, every experience that's ever taken place is locked in within the physical vehicle, dimensionally within different fractals. To understand that a little bit more, you've got the soul that locks in all the experiences within man in the cells, but you've got the essence that comes into man at the moment of conception. He's linked to the heart, the spark of life, and that's the spirit. Now, they're two different things. The soul itself, the moment the baby's born, it's a hologram of time with all the genetics of the hologram of the mother and the father within it, and all the ancestors through time. You know, we're dealing with issues of stolen generation, and we go back to the great-great-great-great-grandmother. What command spirit of great-great-grandmother is a hologram of time. Come forward now. Next minute, it's reliving the trauma of the soul experiences that happened hundreds of years ago, where they've just come and taken the children. And out of the body, it's talking and saying, you know, I can't afford to love any more of my children because I don't know when to come and take the rest. So they shut down. That now passes down what the science today call epigenetics, down the genetic line, and affects all the generations under that. Until we unfold time and space back to the juncture of that moment of time, the moment time loops itself back onto itself, it changes at the 7, which is right angles, and creates a new time track outside time, where what was affecting you no longer affects you. That's up on the soul level. Now let's go into the spirit. The spirit comes in at the moment of time, and is linked to the heart at the moment of conception. Now what takes place? It brings its trauma through time. Any trauma it had in past lives, no matter how far back in time, sometimes we go back hundreds of thousands of years, where people are reliving trauma that's taken place. You know, you go into children's hospital today and the doctors are saying, we don't know what's wrong with half the kids in here. Well, what's wrong with half the kids is spirit brings through trauma of the past in the first 7 years and sets it up. We had a client just yesterday as an example, and the little boy's got all these lung problems. Went straight back yesterday and he's drowned in a past life. There's his stresses locked in the lungs, he's come through with lung problems because of that trauma at that moment of time. So man himself is a hologram through time, and every thought process becomes part of the fractals that's locked into the cells, and then as a fractal, they're going to reproduce themselves for their own survival. So man becomes his own creation of his own dimension by the thought processes. So and other things invites in, of course.
It seems to me that DNA would be the sort of the physical embodiment of this fractal system.
That's correct. And it's quite amazing because we go back with people to find out where a lot of these traumas come from. And it's at the moment of conception and in the first month. What's happening, little spirit? Mum and dad are talking about having me aborted. How does that make you feel, little spirit? They don't want me. Well, their life's not wanted is locked in. They keep reproducing it because they're stuck in that moment of time, which is the thought process of the little spirit at that moment. It's where everything mum and dad are talking about.
So this understanding that you have, this actually came from Aboriginal teachings. No, can you describe how you came to this system?
Okay, I'm an Aboriginal descendant. We'll look at first off at the vehicle. which is the soul of the being. So my great-grandmother, at the age of 8, was taken away under the stolen generation and locked up, virtually sold. At 14, found in horse shackles, sold to a drover, and died at 15 years old, giving birth to my grandmother. My grandmother was brought up in a cattle station, very well educated by the church, but the maids, the butlers, the gardeners, all took her under the wing, and they taught her the old ways. Now, as I'd growing up, my grandmother would talk about the old ways, and that had started triggering off more knowingness and memories in me. Let's go to my spirit now. As a 4-year-old, my mother sat me down and wanted to know how I knew these things were happening, because I was telling her things that were going to take place in the future before they happened, and they came spot on. And I can still remember today thinking, well, doesn't everybody remember the past? And she said, no. And I had full memory of the past. I have worked on hundreds of kids today that have full memory of their past. I also know of cases where under psychiatrists today, they've been given electric shock treatment for remembering things they claim don't exist, which shows how ludicrous our system is today. So because I have what came in with the spirit, the knowingness of the past, and then in the genetics, I have the ancient and the old ways that's been passed down the genetic line. Now, as I grew up, by the time I was 8, I could physically make water go around my finger without touching it. By the time I was a teenager, I was doing mind magic. I could do hilarious things at parties, but I wanted to know not what I'm doing, how am I doing it? Because we're never taught any of this. It went on from there to eventually, after 40, 50 years of research, to where we are today. And it's been a slow progression of understanding all the dimensions and understanding that everything is linked to its own dimension of time. But you've got to understand where the dimension came from.
Right, right. So, but it seems to me that time is obviously completely relative. It seems that we can basically change not only the future, but also the past in a moment of choice, in a moment of free choice or decision to change, to alter something that will then have repercussions across both forward and backward across time, no?
Well, what takes place is you've got to understand that we're like a coil moving through time and space. And what takes place is in the past, we have what's known as deja vu, where it's all happened before. What's happening now is a reflection of the past. What's going to happen in the future is what's happened in the past is happening now, what's happening now is going to happen in the future. But if we in the present change the past, we create a new outcome for that future. Nothing has to be the way it is.
Yeah, there's certain studies that are, not just studies, how do you say, there's certain quantum physical sort of theories about that perhaps our future selves are actually communicating to our past selves, which is what we consider to be our current existence, this moment of consciousness. We're actually being affected by our future selves as well.
If we can lock in something and we become stuck in time with that dimension where it's repeating itself through time, right through our lifetime affecting us, until we unfold time and space in that dimension, it's a mathematical formula the way it works. And the moment we loop time 360 degrees, it completes that dimension. It changes at the 7, which is right angles, and creates a new time track, right angle to the time track you're on. You're now on a new time track, where the old time track no longer affects you, and the new time track's the time track you've just created, which from this moment on is the future.
Mm. But how important are, for example, because we know in the mystery schools in the Western world, that is derived from a lot from the East actually, but the mystery schools teach about certain symbols, signs, dates, for example, astrological dates, alignments, having importance in affecting our being. That's why rituals are conducted around these things, right? How important are those outer physical manifestations in order to actualize what we're talking about in terms of changing things? Do these dates actually create variables in a sense to create, for more interaction with entities that might change your current state, or wormholes to other dimensions? I mean, how much are we being affected by these symbols and dates?
Man is being affected to the degree that everything is affecting everything else. Every planetary system out there is actually having an effect on you. And the day you're born, it actually has an effect upon your time track under that star system that you're actually born under. But when it comes to other dimensions, well, what takes place is that nothing can invade the space of another without permission, because there are certain laws. You talk about the old mystery schools, yes, every symbol embodies an entity. And when they start doing rituals and calling in things from other dimensions, that's free will choice of opening doors to other dimensions. That's inviting beings in that are more than too willing to come in and take over your vehicle. There's not enough vehicles to go around. For them to experience this molecular mortal world, they need to have a vehicle. And the only way to get in is for you to open the door and to let them in. So this way, when people take drugs and the alcohol and go and do rituals, they're actually disempowering their own spirit and giving power to something outside themselves to take over and manipulate themselves. When you understand, my 40 odd years of working on, hundreds of thousands of clients in 40, 50 years we've worked on, and you find that people are back in time reliving. You see how the game's structured, and nothing seems to be what we seem to think it is. It's totally different. Now, example, a lot of these people in the ritual stuff and a lot of people in governments use occultism. Occultism is calling in the dark side to obey your very command. Yes, these things will come through, and yes, these things will, but there's a price. They want the soul, they want your vehicle. The key is, and what we've got away from, is Aboriginal culture for 60,000 years was aligned with nature. It knew that everything's alive. It knew the trees are alive, the rocks are alive, the plants are alive. Every living thing has a life form known as a spirit. And by communicating to that spirit by acknowledging, will acknowledge you, and they communicate. They didn't go out with shopping baskets when they went hunting. They'd go out with absolutely nothing. The spirit of the tree, tell them where the water was. They communicate the spirit of the animal. They'd ask an animal to donate itself. That spirit would donate itself. It moved to a higher octave. In other words, it could incarnate now into something else that spirit could. And it's cycles of time with everything moving through time and space, but also taking on different forms. The moment we, through occultism, call something in, we disempower that spirit and we give power to something outside ourselves. What I see today is so many people out there giving power to things outside of their reality, which then makes them part of their reality, and disempowering their own spirit, not acknowledging their own spirit. The moment man can get back to listening to his own spirit, the internal world or the external world, it can rearrange this universe and manifest the realities that we need. Whereas man is going from the external world to the internal world by bringing things into his reality.
Do you think that this loss of that connection that the Aboriginal cultures had to nature, to spirit, was this caused because of occult practices, that basically a hierarchy was formed basically of powers that were using occult practices, bringing in these, as you mentioned, entities or whatnot into our reality that basically obstructed that natural relationship that we used to share?
Well, again, it's twofold. Twofold to the degree that we've had many other beings, external beings from external realities, come into this dimension and then try to manipulate this dimension, this world, for its own agenda. Our world has been controlled by other forces, which it has been for thousands of years. But those other forces, if you go back and you look at in nature, at all the Aboriginal cultures around the world, whether it be up in the Inuits of Canada or Alaska or your own American Indians, or whether it go back into Ireland, they did the same thing. The English themselves, when they moved in to England, they took away the children and they had the stolen generation there. This was about the children no longer having the knowledge passed down to them of the internal world. With stolen generation here in Australia, they took away tens of thousands of children, and that would traumatise the spirit of the child. It would traumatise the spirit of the parents. It would traumatise the spirit of the community. When the spirit's traumatised, that gives other beings access to the vehicle, or the soul, in other words, to manipulate. It's a game. It's an interdimensional game that's been going on for thousands of years. And man has just been stuck in the game, playing the game and running the game that they've set up.
Right. But what kind of beings are we talking about that have set it up? I mean, people talk about reptilians, they talk about aliens, gray aliens. Are these interdimensional entities, essentially, that people assume to be alien?
You've got extraterrestrials, extradimensionals, and interdimensionals. Extradimensionals, the greys, they're extradimensionals. They've come in here. You've got the reptilians that are interdimensional. They're on another dimension. This used to be their world till what I call the billiard ball effect, and that is that our planet about 1 million years ago had a collision. I didn't realise this until I was in New York at the Geological Museum, and in there it states scientists were aware at one time the moon bounced off the Earth. Well, I've had 17 beings go back screaming in trauma as we had 11 aboard massive UFOs waiting and watching, and the rest were stuck on the planet as this planet was coming in and collided with the Earth. When it collided, it created what I call the billiard ball effect. We moved to a different time-space location. When that happened, the beings that were here, because of their dimension, they're here still on another dimension when they've come back. We don't see them because, we have been genetically engineered into this new dimension that the billiard ball effect has created. It's a whole new dimension as we move through time and space and settle down where we are today. Now, these beings, and I believe they are draconian beings that are actually manipulating and running our world and have been for thousands of years through all the rituals. We go back with clients that have got massive stuff attached. And one thing I understand is anything that's attached to a person, whether it be a spirit, whether it be an entity, whether it be a draconian, a gargoyle, the winged serpent, there's so many different beings out there. But nothing can get in unless you let it in, and everything attached is attached to a dimension of time. Where did it come from? We have to find the dimension it first came in back in time. We've got to unfold time and space in that dimension, change that dimension back in time so it never takes place, and they can no longer come through time to affect that dimension. What we've found is that there is law, L-O-R-E, which Aboriginal culture lived by for 60,000 years. But law is actual Aboriginal. It is universal knowledge of how the universe works. I believe it's a safeguard mechanism in the universe as an equal opposite to occultism, where occultism is bringing in beings from other forces, and once that takes place through rituals, then you've got one of the laws, and that is he who enters the game of another is subject to the laws of the game. He who's born under the dimension of another is subject to the laws of the game. What's that mean? Example. I've been to high security prisons for mentally insane and some of the most violent prisoners in the prison system. I've got a case here where the man himself, the guards think it's a great joke because what we're doing, and they think no way in the world you might change this fella. Anyway, we get him on the table, get permission to work with him. He goes back. His mother and father, alcoholics and drug addicts, and he knew nothing but violence all his life. He was born under that dimension. That's all he knew. But the moment we unfolded time and space and put him outside of that dimension, you couldn't believe how humble with gratitude the man was. He didn't want to be that way, but he was that way because he was born under that dimension. Now, when you take occultism and you start to enter these dimensions, then you're governed by the laws of these beings that are coming through from those dimensions. You're now in their game. You're not controlling the game anymore. And when these things start to shapeshift at some of your rituals, then you've got these guys that are packing it.
What's that?
They're now stuck in the game.
What did you say? They're packing it?
Packing it.
What does that mean?
Shit scared.
So you're saying basically these beings attach, they attach to people, and then what happens when the person dies? Has the soul already been evicted, and basically the being just carries on to the next incarnation?
What it means is that when you die, he has the born rights to your vehicle of the future. He'll be coming through in the vehicle, and you're in the back seat. You're no longer driving the vehicle.
Mm-hmm. And so the most common, you would say, the Draco reptilians are the most common sort of entities to take over?
They're the hierarchy that are manipulating. There are many different extraterrestrial beings being here. There are many interdimensional beings that have come through here. But the hierarchy of them at present is the draconians, the winged serpents, the hierarchy above that. If you go in the biblical part, it says the dragon and serpent of old is Satan, the devil himself. Remember, Satan was a fallen angel, a winged serpent. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. But not all the beings that are entering this dimension, let's say from, as you said, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, they're not all negative.
Well, let's just go back now and let's do a little bit of common sense. Now, if you are an intelligent being and you're aware about the universe and its laws, and you're aware that he who enters the game of another is subject to the laws of the game, would you come down and get trapped in the game of a lower species?
No.
Thank you. Now, the second thing is that if you're a more advanced being out there, you realise you cannot interfere with the progression of a species. Every time man has interfered in any form or any way, the progression of a species is virtually wiped out the species. Everything must progress at its own pace within its own dimension of time.
Right. So you're saying the higher beings would never interfere. They would simply...
That's correct.
Would they even observe?
They're off planet observing, watching what's going on. They won't enter into the game because they won't interfere with the speech of another because it's a violation of law. The beings that do come here they have their own agenda. They want the vehicle for the future.
So what is man doing here? Why did our soul, did our souls descend from a higher consciousness into a lower consciousness, or are we evolving souls that are looking to try to make this ascension to a higher place?
Man originally, if you go back in time, and even the old biblical part, the Sumerian text, it'll talk about the genetic engineering in the Garden of Eden, where we call the Garden of Eden, and it'll talk about genetic engineering of man. It wasn't till Adam, the Adama, and the Eve mated in this time-space location that they created a new molecular mortal species, and that was man, the molecular structure in this dimension of time. Remember, we'd moved through time and space after collision into a new different location of space. The beings that were here are still here on another dimension, but the manipulation of man, there's a program in the genetics they've put in of amnesia. The moment your spirit came down to take a vehicle, it dropped into amnesia. I mean, right now, for your whole audience, I'd like your audience to stop for 1 second, and I want the spirit of all of the people out there listening to awaken from your amnesia. Your spirit is aware of everything that's ever taken place. The only thing is, it's not aware of the entrapment that it got trapped into when it came here.
And why is that, though? The entrapment you're saying was conducted by the reptilian species?
Well, let's go back once more. And in the old records of the past, they're digging them all around the world now, or the joints, skeletons they're finding. The old biblical part talks the Nephilim up on the earth. And after 144,000 years, the Nephilim uprised and went back to where they came. Well, that tells me after 1 to the square to the cube, from the invisible world to the visible world, and at the end of the 3 dimensions, the past, the present, and the future, a new conjunction takes place. And they went back to where they came. They need a new species. So then they genetically engineered what was known as the Adapa, big solid beast. He's not yet of molecular structure. He couldn't think for himself, and he was known as an Adapa. Today we can call him Yowie, Sasquatch, Mongols, Snowman, Yeti Man, Dagobi Man. The Aboriginal will tell you, never catch a Yowie, mate. He's there 1 minute, gone the next, because he moved between dimensions.
The Yahweh.
He's not yet of the Yowie, yeah. And he's not of molecular structure. It wasn't until the Adama and the Eve mated in this time space that create a new molecular mortal being, man, in this dimension.
Mm-hmm. So we were cut off at that point because of the sexual...
Man was purely simply here. So when these beings went back out into space, 3,600 years later, when they come back here, these beings, and if you remember originally, they'd put in the kings and the queens, the lords, the ladies, the masters, the servants, and the slaves. And the structure was most humans were slaves to do the mining operations here on the earth.
Mm-hmm. But does that come from also, aside from the Sumerian texts, does that come from the lore, of the Aborigines as well, or from the soul memories that are picked up from your clients and whatnot?
When you've dealt with hundreds of thousands of clients and you've gone back in time, and I'll just give you an example here. I had 17 clients that have gone back. So one of the cases I heard screaming at one of the big centres we were doing, I come in and this woman's just hysterical. We access straight in, bang, bang, straight there. She's back there over 1 million years ago and she's watching this planetary system coming in to the Earth. She's screaming, couldn't get off planet because there wasn't enough craft to take people off. The collision took place and we got knocked into a new orbit. Out of the 17 people I've worked on around the world, none knew each other, but they all described something very similar. I'd say, look down to your hands and feet and tell me what you see. Oh my God, webbed fingers, webbed toes of reptilian appearance. This was a reptilian world. And when you take a planet, the distance from the sun multiplied by the speed of light, you get its time-space location, which governs the spin of the electron around the nucleus. Like attracts like, and there's your atomic structure, there's your molecular structure of that dimension. I look at every planet out there and believe there's life in every planet on its own dimension. We only look through a molecular dimension, visible light. When you go to the astronomies and you look out into space, what do you see? Galaxies and planets. But when you look through the infrared telescopes, you see whole galaxies that exist that we don't see with the naked eye in other dimensions.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. So you're saying, so we were basically the beings that were here were reptilian, and then because of a shift in space-time, we took a different form, or because of the genetic engineering, we took a different form into this current...
The moment we moved to a different time-space location, this became a world without beings. The other beings are here in another dimension, but now, as this world has moved to a new dimension, they then had to mine, they had a whole new world to mine. Mm-hmm. So other beings came down, many beings. I mean, if you go back in time, and there was dozens, and the old biblical part, in the early books, where they haven't taken out, it mentions all the different beings that were here upon the earth. Mm-hmm. But their own agenda.
Right. So ultimately, though, what you're saying is, despite the agenda of the various entities that are working to keep the trap going, to keep the game going, and using basically us as vehicles for what? For purposes of entertainment, food, energy. I mean, ultimately, what do they get out of it? As you said, why would you as a being want to come in, incarnate into this physical form?
Humans are a wonderful machine, if you want to put it this way. You know, we can create emotions that create energy that can actually feed other dimensions.
Yeah.
And one of the things is the energy source they're after.
So what is their game plan with us, basically? What is their end game? How would the future look if they achieved their will?
Well, right now, I question some of the chemtrails that are going out there. I say not only are the chemtrails putting all this rubbish in the atmosphere, but are they trying to change our atmosphere? Are they trying to change our species for the future so they have an easier species, they have an easier vehicle to move into that they can survive in? You see, this is the time of the harvest. And as it's time of the harvest, we're coming to what's known as a conjunction at the end of the cycle, where the new cycle starts. And if they can get you to submit to them in any form or any way, then they have the vehicle of the future. In other words, you're in the back seat and they have the born rights to the vehicle. If they can change the atmospheric energy here for the species, because they may need something more in our atmosphere for their survival to take over these vehicles. Mm-hmm. You see, right now you've got a visible world and an invisible world. The two are merging. As they merge, you have beings from the invisible world coming through and mass into this world. This is why, look, mental health's going to get worse than ever over the next few years, next 8 years, as we reach the peak of the conjunction. It's already starting. You've got new beings coming through. Your military have been doing exercises on the pandemic of the future. And a lot of these new beings that are coming through ice, which again is becoming part of the pandemic. And they're half animal, half human, these beings that are coming through. We bring these things up on the table. We bring them through. And we have sometimes these things hissing and spitting and shape-shifting on the table. Nothing surprises me anymore in some of the things we've seen.
But you're saying they're coming through a person, or they're coming through on their own as separate beings?
When they're in a human body and we bring these things through, sometimes they'll physically start to morph on the table and shape-shift on the table. Mm. If they don't want to leave, there'll be a battle and a half take place. Once we move them out, you'll see features of the being change on the table, because the being that was in there is no longer manipulating the human species. So the features of the species will change.
So what is the essential technique that you use you talked about the unfolding of time and being able to retrieve. It's almost like a soul retrieval. How does that process work?
No. Get that word soul retrieval out of here. It's got nothing to do with that. We're not using the soul. As an Aboriginal descendant, we spend millions of dollars in royal commissions, deaths in custody reports, the rights of Indigenous Australians, the rights of mental health in Australia. And out of all the millions of dollars, what came out of that with every single inquiry, the elders state, we need to heal the spirit. The spirit has been traumatised through time. It needs to be healed. When you heal the spirit and it awakens from its amnesia, it can enfold time and space and it can change the soul. The soul can't change the spirit. So what we need to do is we need to find out what people are stuck in to enfold time and space. There's a whole range of things. Your thoughts become thought forms. Your thought form become life forms. The life forms have a right to survive, so they're, as a fractal, going to reproduce themselves like fractals do for the hologram, and you're stuck in time. There's all your prisoners in the prison system repeating the same things over and over and not knowing why. Until we enfold time and space in that dimension and put them outside time, and what was is no more. Then you got spirits. You get animal spirits. If you ever killed an animal or a human without permission, then you violated law and you destroyed his vehicle. He has a right to your vehicle. He can jump in. Now we get people out there barking like a dog and plucking like a chicken, Tourette's. We're going after the animal spirits, bring it up and take it out, no more Tourette's. You get soldiers of war. I've had soldiers of war on my table, and after the Vietnam War, 40 years later, I got spirits of Viet Cong speaking Vietnamese out of the body. I unfold time and space to what took place. I changed the dimension, changed the future dimension, released the spirit, no more mental trauma. I worked on one when I was in America recently, and he fired a mortar into a village in Iraq, and he was on trauma leave. He had 3 spirits in him. We brought the spirits up, enfolded time and space, changed the future for them, released them, and all of a sudden his mental trauma's no longer there. I worked on soldiers from Somalia, soldiers from Afghanistan. You've got to understand, you've got 200,000 soldiers suffering mental trauma. You've got to understand what's going on there.
So is this technique, the technique you used to heal these people, is it a technique that's replicable by others? Or is
I
it
have
something
trained 750 students from 31 countries around the world.
So obviously there's but the technique is not predicated in, is it predicated in words or intonations?
I teach my students how to access the spirit. I teach my students the maths and geometry that is involved in what we're doing. You've got to understand how to apply the proper maths and geometry, otherwise you can become a victim of these beings.
Right.
You've got to understand how to control the game, so you're bringing these beings into your game, now you can deal with them.
Wow.
And it's a dangerous process if, you get a lot of idiots out there, excuse the expression, where people take things and they think they can run with it. You've got no idea of what they're dealing with. When you start to deal with these areas and you start to play around things you don't know what you're doing with, you can be taken over very easily.
So ultimately, it seems that your philosophy, what you're trying to urge people to do, is to reclaim their self, their internal life, as opposed to being constantly feeding into the external reality and giving their energy away to external things. As you said, those external things are then brought into their internal life and affect themselves without them realizing it.
That's correct. It is about the internal world to the external world, which is manifesting internal to externally. It is not external to internal. Remember, there's an equal opposite in all things.
So really, that's the only way to solve this infestation that we're currently facing, this enslavement, this entrapment by these external beings. It's a process.
That's correct. It is to be aware, once you're aware of your spirit for a start, and be aware that nothing can get into your field unless let it in. So how do we let it in? We let it in through rituals, we let it in through prayer, we let it in through drugs, through alcohol. We, through our free will, open doorways to other dimensions when we take these altered state drugs. Once we enter their dimension, they have a right now to our dimension. And once they get in, they don't want to leave.
Right. But it's also a question of where your focus is and your consciousness is, right? I mean, if we're talking about the mass nature of what occult worship used to occur in Dionysian festivals, for example, is now taking place on a nightly basis in clubs or in rock concerts, right, or places like this, where is there a certain potential danger in these kind of situations for the self, for the spirit?
When you go to these places, if you go in and you participate into it, first off, you're entering the game of another. What's the rules of the game you're entering? 2, are you drinking in that game where your defences have been lowered? 3, are you listening to music that is programmed, and the music itself is about opening doors to other dimensions, letting things in, which now you're in that game, you're virtually participating in that new game and letting things in. Free will choice. You can go anywhere as an observer to the game. Observe the game for what it is, a game, but not participate in the game. Right. Just observe the game.
So you said it's the time of the harvest. But what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that there's going to be a separation of those who awake and reclaim their spirit as opposed to those who remain enslaved? Or how are we going to see this actually manifest?
Right now, you've got to look at the 3 dimensions. Deja vu, it's all happened before. We're in the now, and we're now reaching the peak of the new dimension of the future. I believe there's 8 years to go. It's already started. 14th of August 2013 it started. It'll go to August 2023 will be the conjunction date. We have 8 years. Now the aim is, and this is why if you stop and have a look, suicides are going through the roof. Why? Because if these beings, by you opening doors and they come in, if they can get you to terminate yourself, then they have the soul for the future. They have the vehicle. They have the born rights to your vehicle in the future. This is why it's known as the harvest. To harvest many souls they can back into the game for the next cycle of time, which will be, thousands of years again, where nothing moves on. At the conjunction period, there's right now 2 worlds. There's a visible world and there's an invisible world merging. In the old biblical part, you go and look at the records there and it says, and end times, you can be standing beside a friend with a twinkle of an eye, they're gone, you're left standing. I believe there's merging of 2 dimensions. The dimension you're in is either going to be Groundhog Day, where it starts all over again, or you evolve in the next dimension by that awareness that you've evolved up to. Remember, you got the low level of everything. Man first as a spirit came through the firmament, the gases, the liquid, the rocks, the plankton, the plant life, insect life, animal life, and the human life. And in the humans, he goes through the octaves. You got the low level of human that wouldn't hesitate to mutilate, and then you work up to man as he's moving through the octaves up into a higher level of consciousness where he realises that, what life is really about, and he's ready to move into the next dimension. You can't take something from a low level and move them up the ladder into the next dimension. It doesn't exist. You can't do that. It's like putting a ladder against the wall. When you get to the top of the ladder, you're going to see the big picture. But meanwhile, at the bottom of the ladder, you've got to go 1 step at a time up that ladder. You take 2 steps and I find you have a mental breakdown. And this is the same. You can't take something from a low level into the next level. They're not ready for it. Right. Everything must be a progression of evolvement of the species as it moves into the next dimension.
But if we're talking about going to another dimension, by 2023, you're saying, it'll be more of an instant, will it be the same world, or will the world look entirely different?
I believe right now what's happening in the visible is happening in the invisible. I believe there are 2 exact worlds taking place. And in a twinkle of an eye, one of the things we are finding right now, it's really interesting, one thing we're finding right now are what I call time loops in the physical world of reality. And to understand that, I've got a woman who comes to me and she says, I think I've been abducted. I said, why is that? She said, I was driving through a set of lights. I looked up and there's a great big semi-trailer bearing down on me. That's all I remember. I got home at 2:45 in the morning. My husband's pacing back and forwards. He was ropeable. I was due home at 11 o'clock and there was 4 hours of missing time. Okay, so on the table. I go to access and the spirit took us straight back into deja vu, where it's all happened before. Got through a set of lights, meh, bang! The semi hit her and it took 4 hours for her to die. This time it repeated itself. She got to a set of light, instant recall and just let go. The moment she let go, time looped itself and put her outside 4 hours. She got home 4 hours later. I looked at that because I should be dead at least 4 times. And one of the times on a motorcycle broadsiding down the road, about to go under a Volkswagen. And I remember saying to myself, oh, well, here come a couple of broken legs. And the moment I accepted it, something went zap and put me in front of the car. Impossible to do. I've since spoken to other people that said I should be dead. I said, what happened? And I'm finding time loops. Now, I've got a video there in Russia at an intersection where the video in the car is following the car in front, and all of a sudden in front of the car, a car comes from absolutely nowhere, out of nowhere, and just continues the journey. As if in the past there was a major accident, people mostly have died, but all of a sudden time looped itself and it continues on onto the dimension where it was meant to be for the future. When we unfold time and space on dimensions with people, the moment they accept what's taken place in the past, it instantly loops time, puts them outside time, and changes the future cycle of time. It's just another level.
Right, and so this is the point basically of us almost answering to the past, cleansing ourselves, if we're open to it, cleansing ourselves of it, so that we can then start afresh come 2023.
That's correct. One of the things that is very important to understand law, and this is why Aboriginal culture, didn't need to sign contracts. It nodded its head because that was its agreement under law. What would take place is man is responsible for his thought, his word, his deed, and his actions. But if any time through the past you've harmed another, then I can guarantee you're going to come back to experience the same thing upon yourself. Only then will you understand the dimension that you've created as a reality, which affects all the other dimensions. Only then can we be brought back into balance. Mm-hmm. The universe doesn't pass judgment. It says if you want to go to war, mutilate and kill, that's fine. But you must experience what it's like to be mutilated and killed because you created that reality and it's affecting other realities. Now, once you've experienced it, do you want to go down that road or do you want to make changes? And the moment they make change, the universe says, well, that's great. Now we can have balance.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost the ending of karma in a sense. We have to bring that karma from the past to its conclusion. You have to suffer through your consequences, and then it can be rebalanced.
That's correct. Not all karma is universal law of compensation to compensate for your imbalance so you can bring it back into balance. Mm-hmm. And you don't always have to go through to experience it. If you're genuinely remorseful for what you see and what you've done, then the universe itself, if you're genuinely remorseful and you're prepared to let go of it, says, okay, and it'll deal with it. It's about spotting what it is you've created. I find a very interesting thing with the people we've worked with over the years. If something happens to a child in the first 3.5 years, well, the first thing is, why would an innocent child have to come back to have these issues? We then go back in time and space to show the child, or show the person, I should say, what they did in the past that they have to come back as a child to experience upon themselves. The moment they see that, time can loop itself and put them outside time.
So generally speaking, it seems you're optimistic about where we are going, the sense that there is going to be a definitive break, a new cycle that we're entering, so that no matter what, even though some will be left behind, ultimately we are approaching this. It's a definitive break in time. You cannot avoid it.
That's correct, and it's just look. The universe doesn't care whether you hang on to something for 1 second within its dimension or for 1,000,000 years within its dimension. It doesn't care. It's only a dimension of time. That's all. It makes no difference to the universe. It's up to you. Do you want to hang on to something for 5 seconds, or do you want to hang on to it for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime until you're prepared to look at it?
Right. Steve, thank you so much. I want to direct our listeners to your website. It's holographickinetics.com, right? Is that where they can go for more information?
www.holographickinetics.com, correct.
Absolutely. So they can go and also if clients want to book an appointment with you, is it only in person?
I prefer in person. I work with a lot of kids by surrogacy work we'll do, but I prefer people to experience their own experience to understand what they did to create it. Why should somebody else do all the work for you and you do nothing and you don't see what you created?
Oh, right. No,
so I prefer
not through Skype or phone. It's basically in person.
Yeah, but I have students, and as I said, from over 31 countries around the world.
Oh, so fantastic. So people basically hopefully reach out to you and potentially connect with some of your students if they want to experience this for themselves.
That's correct.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for joining us today and talking about these fascinating topics, and hopefully the people can go to you and actually experience what you're talking about firsthand, so they don't have to rely upon your word to understand that these things are very real and present.
Oh yeah, look, as I said, we've worked on over 100,000 clients, I'd say, in the 40, 50 years of doing this, and our research keeps going to new levels, and we're showing different things, and you know, today we understand that nearly everything's alive. Everything's alive. Every injection you've ever had, every drug you've ever taken is alive. Everything seeks its own survival once it's in the vehicle and wants to take over and run that vehicle.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating to constantly reassess and revolutionize essentially our own thought process, to understand that, as you said, there is no end to the past. It's still living in some form and still affecting us.
And will continue.
Exactly. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we'll hope to speak with you again soon.
Yeah, more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Well, there you have it, folks. A fascinating insight into perhaps a bit of this reality that we're living in, so that you can understand what we've been emphasizing on this show for so long, which is to say the sovereignty of your own being. Assert the sovereignty over yourself, otherwise others will do it for you. This is Sean Stone signing off.